Hello friends, welcome to my channel Sushant Chess Wise. Today we are going to look at the next topic, that is the theoretical Rook Endgame, and we are going to discuss the next theoretical Rook Endgame. We have got the position, everyone knows this is the Lucena position, and we see that if it is black to play, black wins the game very easily. First let us remove the pawn. The pawn is on the d file, so the d file is dividing the board into two halves. The ideal location for the defender's king is the shorter side and the longer side is needed for the rook. If it is black to play, then black wins the game very easily. He goes rook b7 check, forces the king away. After king c3, kc1, and we see that the pawn will queen. Rook check will allow the pawn to queen. Rook takes, king takes, and black will win the game. After the move king a2 or a3, black just places the rook on the fourth rank. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he can obstruct the white's rook check by interposing the rook. For instance, if rook e8, then kc2, rook check, kd3, rook check, kc3, the zigzag maneuvering continues. Rook c8, kd4, rook d8 check, and rook comes to d5. After rook d5, rooks would be traded and the black pawn will queen. So this part of the position has been discussed before. It is called the Lucena position. But we are going to talk about this position with white to play now. The fact which I discussed in the previous theoretical endgame, that the distance between the pawn and the rook is very important. See, here we see the gap of 3 files in between them. There is E, F and G file. Rook is on the H file and the pawn is on the D file. If the distance between this pawn and the rook is less, then the rook is unable to keep on giving checks. So we will learn two cases now. We will keep the rook ideally first and we will check if the rook is closer, then what happens. Let's say this is the position, white to play. Rook comes, rook h1 check, ke2, rook h2 check, ke3, king has to keep the pawn protected, rook h3, king can go to f4. Moment the king tries to go near and attack the rook comes behind the pass pawn, and we see that the pawn is instantly lost. Rook is unable to support the pawn, and next move the pawn would be taken. So king goes to e4 after rook h3 check. Again checks continue, rook h4 check. Now same, if king goes to f5, then the rook goes to d4. Black can try to set a trap. He can play the move king f3, after which rook d4, then ke2, and we see that we can fall into this trap. After rook e4 check, the king attacks the rook, and we see that the pawn will be able to queen over here. So after the move king f3, still check, rook h3 check, and now after ke2 again check. As soon as the king attacks the rook goes behind the pawn and the pawn is lost. And after the only other move ke2, again rook h2 check. If black takes the king far away, after rook e4, rook h4, ke5, rook check, ke6, then we can simply play the rook to h1, come to d1 and takes rook into d2, and the game is drawn. So after k, e5, rook d1, ke4, rook d2, and the game is drawn over here. Let's reduce the distance of the rook and see now. Let's assume the rook is on the g8 square. Now the distance between the pawn and the rook has become of only 2 files. So now after the move rook g1 check, ke2, rook g2 check, just ke1 trying to queen the pawn, and now after rook g1 comes the move king f2, and suddenly we realize that the rook has to waste the move now. If rook comes to d1, then king comes to e2 and the pawn queens. Rook has to be given up. The only attempt is the move rook h1. where it looks like the game can still be drawn. Now there is just one move which wins for black. See, the problem is that the white rook is having only one square where it is safe from the king's attack, because if we go kg2 right now, then rook d1. So black snatches away that place with the move rook h7, and we see that now white has nothing but to take h7. After rook takes h7, d1 queens, we reach a queen versus rook position, and it is winning for black. We are going to discuss some theory based on queen versus rook as well. And after any other rook move on the rank, after rd1, king e2, rook is attacked, rook moves d1 queens. And similarly, after rook a1 also, just king e2, next move d1 queens. So kc2 forced, after which there are two ways. Either we can play d1 check, queen check first, rook check, and then rook check, or else first rook c7 check, forcing the king away, king b3, and then d1 queen, rook takes, king takes, and black wins the game. So the king has to be on the short side and the rook has to be on the long side. I hope you are finding these lessons useful. Do like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for your time.